I was on the phone to one of our customers the other day and he'd asked what I'd been up to. And I said, oh yeah, look, I've been slogging through the documentation, particularly the stuff around our 12-volt systems. And he's like, yeah, it's hard work, but eventually that'll flip and the documentation will work hard for you. And I feel like in a lot of cases, that's where we're at, where the documentation and the effort from our past selves has now turned around and become super, super helpful. So we don't just want the documentation to work hard for us, we want the documentation to work hard for any future owner of this car, whether it's the first owner or 3 owners after this in 20 years' time. So that extends to little things like just labeling the fuses. So as you saw on the diagram, these are all labeled under this panel. So you can see the fuses in there and you know what they do. But it also extends to things like the plaque here on the dash. So on the radiator panel. So there's a chassis number, of course, but there's a QR code. And if I do a weird filming of me filming, if I hold any modern device like an iPad or a phone, you can see I get it reads the QR code. I can launch that, and then it basically loads up the support page for this vehicle. So this is all the engineering documentation for the car. So, picture of the car, obviously, but then we go into the motor and controller, the gear selection, all these systems. Now, this is the report that we provide to the certifying engineer, but it also has some useful things, some diagrams like within the brake system. So a diagram of how the brake system works and things like we've got to create our own vacuum, so there's a vacuum pump going into a tank, that's going into the booster, how all these things connect to the PDM, so we know if there's a failure in any of the systems, and also details of each component, which ones are used, the brake pressure transducer, how the regen braking functionality works, links to the individual parts, the manuals for all of those parts, because the worst thing is, some of these parts, we try and use really high quality stuff, it's going to last for a long time, but maybe that manufacturer's not going to be around forever. So having the manual available, if their website doesn't exist anymore, is really good. Where it's mounted, how the warning system works, all of that kind of stuff. So that also includes, say, the 12-volt system that we've been talking about. So I can load up the fuses and batteries so we can see an overview diagram of the way the PDM is connected to the DC to DC, to the 75 amp hour deep cycle battery, where it is, of course, how it's mounted, all of those kinds of things. Then into the pin layout and the input and output diagram, also the software to run the PDM, the configuration file of that PDM, on and on and on and on and on. Now, again, this is useful, super useful for us, and it allows us to scale production, but it means that you've got something more valuable than just a one-off car. You've got a car that comes with what we hope is more accessible documentation and information than you'd get on a lot of OEM cars. Of course it's out there, but often you've got to pay for that or have the right software. We want to make this freely available for anyone who owns these cars to have access to.